Recently, we've been taking a look at the flat Earth documentary called Scamtarctica. So far, we've looked at the first 21 minutes or so of the documentary, and we're going to carry on today. This is debunking another flat Earth documentary, part 3. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, for another video with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. Right, on with today's video then, which, as you know from the intro, is part 3 of debunking the flat Earth documentary called Scamtarctica. Last time out, the documentary was focusing on 3 websites and the discrepancies between them when predicting sunrises and sunsets and the length of the 24-hour summer in the south. The first 2 parts are linked in the description if you want to get up to speed. Go and watch those videos now if you haven't yet, and then come back to this one afterwards. So the documentary last time spent a few more minutes moaning about discrepancies between those 3 websites and the sunrise and sunset times at McMurdo Station in Antarctica before they moved on to another station. Let's have a look.
And it's all of the bases, not just McMurdo. Australia's Casey Station, allegedly 1,615 miles away. A massive 3-day discrepancy between what date the alleged 24-hour sun starts. But at least 2 of them agree, yet dateandtime.info claims it starts 3 days earlier on December 7th. Then, suddenly, all 3 disagree on when it ends. And dateandtime.info now claims it ends 2 or 3 days later than the other 2, claiming a whopping total of 5 to 6 more days of 24-hour sun, almost off by a week.
This again is excellent evidence to suggest that this website, dateandtime.info, is not good enough for this sort of thing. Remember, in the last episode we established it was more of a world clock website than anything else.
You call that accurate, Jaron? Because even though sunrise.map logs had no info on them, I have a sorted list of 18 different bases in the alleged 24-hour sun latitude circle that all have anywhere from 1 to 5 days of total error and discrepancy between timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info.
Now, here the narrator pulls out what seems like a damning statement. 18 bases and 1 to 5 days of error. But let's be clear. The closer you get to the South Pole, the blurrier the idea of sunrise and sunset becomes. These websites aren't contradicting reality. They're just interpreting long polar twilight differently. Like we discussed in the last part of this series, you could just as easily say it's a feature of the globe model, not a flaw.
The largest one being 19 days. In fact, there wasn't even a single base that both websites had information on together that didn't have a discrepancy and at least agreed on the total days of 24-hour sun, never mind what dates they allegedly start or stop on, which, by the way, was only 2 out of the 18. One agreed which date it allegedly stopped on, but not which date it started on, and the other one agreed on which date it started on, but disagreed by 2 days on what date the 24-hour sun ended.
So we're told then that 2 daylight tracking websites don't agree exactly on the dates when each Antarctic base experiences 24-hour sun. But think about that for a second. These aren't direct observations, they're models. And when you're near the poles, like I said, a tiny difference in elevation, latitude, or modelling assumptions can shift those dates by a few days. This isn't a smoking gun like you think. It's what you'd expect from precision modelling of a complex system. Expecting 2 daylight websites to match perfectly for Antarctica is like expecting 2 different weather apps to give you the exact same weather for the same location. The physics isn't wrong, your expectations are.
Astute minds will say, hang on, maybe one of them is really correct and the other one is just dodgy and way off. That's what I first thought as I looked at all the data, but there are a few problems with that. One, I've already showed you. They keep taking turns flip-flopping with no consistent pattern of inconsistency, just as you see here. One time they both agree on the end date of the 24-hour sun for the alleged South Pole Amundsen-Scott base, but disagree on the start date. Yet for Belgrano 2 base, they both agree on the start date but not the end. Another problem is, this is it. These are the two major sites that come up online to find this information, the top dogs and nearly only dogs.
And this we addressed in the last episode too, because of course they're not the only sites. There are an absolute raft of websites where you can find this information. I mentioned a few last time out. This is an appalling tactic from the Flurf here, because if no one checks this statement, then they're likely to believe it.
Shouldn't they both be using the immaculate globe model software and predictions Jaron claims they possess if they are the two most trusted sources of this information? Why hasn't the professional community challenged this if one is dodgy and garbage and replaced it with a more reliable resource, if so?
They're funny, this lot. They act like there's some singular globe software stored on a gold hard drive somewhere in Geneva. In reality, there are dozens of astronomical libraries, based on the same physics of course, but with slight variations in how they model things like terrain, refraction and twilight. Just like different GPS apps might give you different ETAs when you're planning a route. Daylight calculations can differ, and it means absolutely nothing. Scientists don't challenge these discrepancies because there's nothing to challenge. It's like arguing whether your drive home is going to take 42 minutes or 44 minutes. You're still going home.
Sometimes, but not usually, some other sites come up in searches like timegenie.com, but it only gives sunrise and sunset for the few bases it has, no solar noon or day length. But again, it does show when alleged 24-hour suns start and stop, if you know what dates to look for. So I urge other researchers to take my work and start expanding on it. Though here again, we see timegenie.com shows McMurdo Base having its 24-hour sun period ending Tuesday, February 18th, where there is suddenly a sunrise time and sunset time. And yet the other three sites we looked at said there was still a 24-hour sun on Tuesday, February 18th. And so now we have three conflicting dates instead of two.
Here we go again. Three websites, three slightly different dates for where McMurdo Station ends its 24-hour sun period. But let's zoom out for a second. They all agree that this phenomenon happens. The only debate is about a day or two of transition. That's exactly what you'd expect near the edge of constant daylight. The sun doesn't suddenly switch off. It dips lower and lower and lower until it finally sets. These are not contradictions. They're natural consequences of modelling a complex system. Yet conspiracy theorists treat any deviation like a fatal flaw. Ironically, this example proves that the globe works. We see continuous daylight for weeks, with predictable sunset timing that only makes sense on a rotating, tilted sphere.
Then it says on Thursday, February 20th, the sun rises at 3:41 a.m. and sets at 12:32 a.m. the next morning, making a 20-hour and 51-minute day, which is an hour and 5 minutes to an hour and 54 minutes shorter than the other three, making four majorly conflicting lengths of day.
Now here they cite timegenie.com as a third source. But here's the problem with that. TimeGenie doesn't even tell you how it calculates sunrise and sunset. There's no solar elevation data, no modelling explanation, no refraction correction, nothing. Comparing that to more robust sources like timeanddate.com is like comparing a sketch to some blueprints. So the fact that its numbers differ slightly doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means you shouldn't be using timegenie.com for serious analysis. Now, they do bang on a bit more about these discrepancies, but I think we've had enough of them. And we've debunked it enough for now, haven't we? So let's move on to see what else they've got to say.
Lastly, as we'll cover later, timeanddate.com and dateandtime.info both usually, but not always, have the exact same solar noontime as each other, but the sunrise, sunset, and day lengths are always different without fail. A smoking gun in itself, as it is impossible to come up with the same solar noon time then, with those always being different from each other.
Solar noon is simply the time where the sun is at its highest point in the sky, i.e. it crosses the observer's meridian. Now that depends only on longitude and the date, and all reputable models will calculate that in the same way, because it's based on Earth's rotation and its orbit, not on atmospheric effects. So yes, two different websites should be reporting the same or near identical solar noon times, because that math is simple and universal. Now we've already explained that the sunrise and sunset times down in Antarctica are not as simple as that. They're modelled differently by different tools, especially near the poles where the sun skims the horizon for hours.
As Nicole Murphy and I covered in great detail in our talk on the secret sacred laws of the luminaries. The globe model seemingly can't predict jack shit accurately, if at all, in Antarctica. Could that be because we don't live on a globe? So they have to lie and fudge it to make it work and hope nobody double checks?
Look, let's be absolutely honest here. If indeed the Earth was flat and there was a giant cover-up, wouldn't you think that they'd make sure that this sort of stuff wasn't noticeable? I think it would seem even more suspicious if all those sites did match exactly, wouldn't it? I think you'll be making a video saying, oh, it's unbelievable. It's like they've all designed it that way. They're all matched exactly. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Just my 2 cents on that.
But I digress. Back to Casey's station, we find the same suspicious story. Different 24-hour sun start dates, wildly different 24-hour sun end dates, totally different length of daytimes on December 6th, the last agreeable date before the alleged 24-hour sun, off by as much as 44 minutes, even more wildly disagreeable length of daytimes on the first agreed date of no 24-hour sun on January 5th, this time magically off by as much as 53 minutes from each other instead of 44 going in.
Look, I don't want to be a critic, but a documentary really should hold the viewer's attention. You've made your point on this, you don't need to keep banging on about it.
Its last agreeable day of no 24-hour sun, December 6th, sunrise times are off by as much as 25 minutes from each other, just as its sunset times that same day are off from each other by as much as 23 minutes. As are its January 5th first agreed day of no more 24-hour sunrise times, all off from each other by as much as 50 minutes, yet its same alleged sunset times that day are magically only off by 24 minutes somehow.
Yep, you're going to keep banging on about it, aren't you? Let's skip on until we find something else they want to say.
I'm sorry. These are not acceptable rates of error and difference within each base for the alleged speeds their latitude lines are supposed to be rotating at on the globe model. Especially for bases like Casey, Davis, and Dumont d'Urville, which are all three allegedly out or up right on the alleged Arctic Circle 66.16 south latitude ring, which should be rotating faster at 420 miles per hour or 7 miles a minute on the globe model.
More fundamental misunderstandings of planetary physics this time. The rotational speed of Earth in miles per hour has nothing to do with when the sun rises or sets. Sunrise and sunsets are determined by the Earth's angular rotation, its tilted axis and your position on the globe, not how fast your location is flying through space. And those bases they list, they're all right near the edge of the Antarctic Circle. That's the edge of the 24-hour sun zone. Of course you're going to see slight variations here in sunset times and daylight duration between them, especially during solstice transitions. That's not evidence against the globe, it's exactly what the globe predicts.
How can Davis possibly have an hour and 46-minute sunrise time discrepancy on November 22nd? That's a discrepancy of 742 miles of sunlight range. Even the hour or more discrepancy between most of the other bases is still 420 plus miles of sunlight, or 2.5 times the length of the entire country of Denmark. That is not an acceptable rate of error,
This might be here the most numerically embarrassing moment in this documentary. The narrator sees a 1 hour and 46 minute difference in Davis Station's reported sunrise time on November the 22nd and converts that into a 742 mile sunlight discrepancy. But that's not how sunlight works. Sunrise is determined by the angle of the sun above the horizon, not by how fast the ground is spinning. Near the poles, the sun crawls across the sky at a shallow angle, and just a tiny change in modelling, like including or excluding atmospheric refraction, can shift that perceived sunrise by over an hour. So no, there's no 742 mile error here. Just someone applying equator-based maths to polar light geometry and getting wildly misleading results. And I think that's an excellent time to conclude part 3 of Debunking Another Flat Earth documentary. What do we think of that section of the documentary there? Let me know in the comments below what you thought. As I say, we're all done and dusted for another video. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it today, please do consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the thumbs up button too. Remember, the link is in the description for the first 2 parts of this series. If you haven't watched them yet, go and check them out now. I've been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a great day, and I'll see you all tomorrow for the 5 worst arguments creationists use against evolution. See you then.